All right. Hello, everyone. First, I want to thank the Inflection crew. This is an awesome conference so far, so I'm excited to be here. So today we're going to talk about how to use product data as your rocket fuel. And really what that means is how do you weave product data into lifecycle and go-to-market motions using a number of tools, including Inflection. So a little bit about me. I lead marketing operations at Sauce Labs, which is a comprehensive testing platform for organizations around the world like Bank of America, Walmart, and Salesforce. Before that, I've led PLG-focused marketing and go-to-market operations at companies like Sanity and Envision. I want to start off with a quote that I think is a really good representation of not only product-led growth, but just thinking from a product lens in a customer point of view. So for those of you who don't know, Peter Drucker, he's kind of coined the father of management. And he's known for his extensive research around how corporations manage their business. So this quote saying, marketing is not a function, it is the whole business seen for the customer's point of view. I think in all the talks we've heard today, a lot of what we have been echoing is keeping it relevant for the customer, right? Less of telling them about why we're the best and why you should buy from our company, but really focusing on how the customer is using your product and what's best for the customer. So this is kind of how I see and how we see at Sauce Labs the pillars of go-to-market success. I'll talk a little bit about each one, but as you can see, the giveaway is that we'll be focusing on data and analytics today. So these go-to-market pillars, I think, make up a successful go-to-market motion at most of the orgs I've worked at. And I think all of us are familiar with all of these. The first one, tech stack. We've talked a lot about today about the tech stack, especially how AI is changing technology stacks. Process and workflows, I think another key theme of today, how do we optimize our process and workflows, especially with all the new tools out there. Content and messaging, obviously a big area. How do we personalize and keep communications relevant for the customers? Cross-functional communication, team communication, making sure that our teams are all working well together from product to sales to marketing. Forecasting and planning, so being smarter about planning out and using data-driven insights to actually plan for not only what sort of revenue targets you need to hit and how to plan for capacity in your sales org, but also how to forecast out, in some of the talks we saw earlier today, how to forecast out what you can actually get from a self-serve motion versus an enterprise motion. And then finally, data and analytics. So this is what we're going to focus on today, specifically product analytics and data and how you can actually incorporate that into different flows. All right, so this graphic here I thought was a good representation of one of the biggest problems I see in a lot of companies, which is one that can hold them back a lot, and that is having different sort of islands of product data and marketing data, and really having them live in separate systems, be in separate formats, and not really be able to be joined together in any meaningful way. This can obviously create all sorts of challenges downstream, from misaligned KPIs to the inability to drive user growth. And most importantly, your customers will feel this disconnection. This is something that we were able to unlock at Sauce Labs when we were able to have connected data and really able to infuse product data throughout all of our different motions. So when you're able to have that integrated data, then you can actually have this flywheel effect instead of having the disconnected teams and disconnected motions that we saw in the previous slide. So from activating product users during onboarding, a lot of us talked today about how you can customize that messaging, have it more trigger-based versus time-based, and have it really specific to the person and the company type that is signing up for your product, to increasing usage and expanding to enterprise. So whether that means nudging your users along within the self-serve product to try to give them to adopt new features, new product lines, or having them jump over to the enterprise motion, being able to do that in an intelligent way and use the actual product data to drive that. Expanding accounts into enterprise, and then finally that sort of feedback loop of making sure that you have product satisfaction. So incorporating NPS into all of your understanding how people are using your product and how they're satisfied with your product, and having that feedback loop with your CS team is really important. This is how we've set up our data foundation at Sauce, and I think it's the first step to getting an integrated data foundation to power your workflows. So in the few slides before, we saw the 2 disconnected islands. This is not a disconnected island. This is where everything's working together, everything's talking to each other, and you're able to actually have all of the teams looking at the same data and the same KPIs. So as you can see here, we set up our data foundation to be really anchored in our data warehouse. And we have bidirectional syncs with Inflection, Salesforce, and with Segment to be able to allow us to communicate out to users and also to surface analytics to ourselves so that we can actually see what's happening in all these systems. So whether it's understanding like utilization rates that are calculated in Snowflake, to understanding what sales reps are actually doing at accounts, how many contacts they're adding, how many people they're reaching out to, that kind of stuff, all of it can be aggregated into one view so you can see it all together. This is sort of an overview of the old way. I think it sounds like a lot of us here are doing away with the old way and moving to the new way. And I think we're all probably familiar with what the old way looks like, right? It's sending time-based onboarding that are irrelevant to you or your usage. And instead, sending proactive usage-based CSM, customer success messaging. Onboarding, before we were able to create proactive triggers, we had just time-based onboarding that was irrelevant to the user. Being able to guide sales around product triggers. So instead of having the classic first-party intent or third-party intent that we're sending to salespeople, telling them to go reach out to someone from a company that has 10,000 employees, now we're doing really intelligent product behavior alerts guiding the sales team. And then finally, lifecycle comms that are triggered by product actions. So we've set the stage with why product data is so important to fuel growth. We've talked about how to build a foundation to allow you to actually utilize the product data. And now I want to jump into 5 examples of how we've actually put this into motion at Sauce. The first one is sales intel and alerts. This is maybe one of my favorite ones because we've gotten the most positive feedback from the sales team, which, in my opinion, is one of the hardest things to do, get positive feedback from the sales team. And one of the first things that happened when we implemented this was I got a number of different Slack messages, but one of my favorites was, I love waking up to these sales alerts every morning. And so what we did here was we identified key action within the product that led to either a happy customer, an upsell motion, key product lines. So maybe they're using one product and it looks like they might be interested in a different product, all that kind of activity. And then we created sales alerts to send to them through a number of different channels, both email, Slack, Salesforce search and reports, kind of all the channels to get it in front of them. And this really allowed them to, one, kind of walk into their ongoing calls they have with customers and feel like they know what's happening at their account. They can say to their champion that they're talking to, hey, it looks like this person from this side of the business was actually interested in this product line. And that really opens up the door to show that there's more value out of other than just the SKU or the product that they're currently subscribed to. And then I think the other piece of it is that it really allows the account executive to understand how the person is interacting with the product. Something that is always incredible to me sometimes when I hop on with our account execs and they're focused on the sales-led motion, a lot of them have never even done a free trial at our company before. And so I think it's really important for every single new AE that I train and onboard to make sure they, one, know what it looks like from a free trial perspective, because we do have so much of our funnel coming from that, and then two, understand what these different alerts mean. Where are they clicking? And that way showing them and training them on what actually happens when they get an alert makes them a lot more excited and makes them feel less of it's marketing telling me to follow up with this lead. It gets them a little bit more bought in. And then the last thing to mention here, we set a goal to have at least one opportunity per week from this program. And we actually saw 8 opportunities within the first 6 weeks directly from this program. And they all had much larger deal sizes than our typical ASP, mostly because it was really within that upsell motion and selling up to some of our largest customers. The next thing I want to talk about is use case-driven onboarding. I think we've seen a lot of good examples today around companies doing this, and I think the classic example that you see is when you get, or the classic bad example you see is when you sign up for a product and they just send you a super general email 3 days in a row, and it has no context as to why you signed up, what your role is, anything like that. So a big thing that I want to caution and what I'm always careful of is only asking data in the product that you will actually use. So a lot of companies will, when you sign up, I think almost every SaaS company I sign up for nowadays will ask me, what's the size of my company? You know, what kind of role am I? A lot of stuff. And to be honest, a lot of it is things that they could go find on my LinkedIn or through enrichment data. And so I think being really careful about what you're actually asking and things that you can't get from enrichment or from a lot of the new tools out there is really important. So like for example, something that we ask is, how do you plan to use our product, right? Use case stuff that you can't really get through enrichment. And what sort of, for us, we have a technical product, what sort of frameworks are you using, things like that. And then we use that information to then send it back how other companies like them are using it, specifically the use case, right? Not just saying, okay, you're in FinServe, you're gonna get the FinServe track, but how are you actually planning to use the product? And that will allow us to tailor the email communications and our in-app communications based off of that. And so before we were, doing the time-based, really old school onboarding emails. And when we switched over, we saw a huge increase in click rate. And we actually saw a 20% increase in invited users, which was one of our key metrics where we wanted to expand at the account and have our primary signups actually expand more people and invite users into their team. Product usage comms. This sort of falls in the same area, but it's further down the life cycle. Once they actually start using your product, sending them information about how they're using your product or how they're not using your product. So, we saw the Spotify Wrapped example earlier, Clay example. We saw a lot of good examples of how customers are sending this sort of summary email. And I think there's no secret to why it's so successful. Humans just like to see what they're doing and like to see what a summary is of how they're using things. Whether it's reminding them that like, hey, you actually use this product a lot, even if you thought you didn't, or if it's, a little bit more viral where you can say, these are the songs I listen to. I think just simply showing people the value they're actually getting out of your product is very impactful. And it sounds like a lot of us have gone down that path. And so maybe this is just a reiteration that it does work and people do like to see it. We also saw some success from sending sort of like lack of product usage emails. So win back emails, kind of reminding people why they signed up in the first place. In an earlier talk, I think someone mentioned that they've signed up for a lot of tools, but they didn't actually go use the product. And so I think there's a lot of us that will do that too, especially in go-to-market where maybe we're top of mind, we heard from someone about a tool, we sign up, and then we never actually do anything. And so reminding that user why they signed up in the first place and really what they're missing out of and giving them FOMO is really important. And that I've seen a lot of success with that. One of the campaigns we did around that revived 85 dormant users and got them back using our product. Lead scoring. I'm sure we're all familiar with lead scoring here, and I've lived many lives when it comes to lead scoring. And hands down, the best conversion rates that I've seen at PLG companies is when you're using your own product data to score your leads. So you can do this in a number of ways, and now that AI has sort of been democratized and we're all able to get our hands on it, I think there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different tools out there, but at the heart of it, it's really gathering your product data and then finding a tool that can summarize for you what are the key moments and key actions that lead to an upsell or conversion rate or so on. And so depending on your company, you may have a number of different models that you train it on. Maybe some conversions you're looking to have a free user go to a paid user. Maybe for some you want a paid user to go to an enterprise user. You can have a few different models for that. And we actually do that, and we have a few different models depending on the product line as well. But really doing that and then integrating, so we basically integrated our segment data, utilized our Snowflake data, and then use that to actually create behavioral-based scoring that is sent into Inflection. That was able to allow us to have a much better conversion rate of our users. We actually look a lot at demographics because we are very honed in on our ICP. Basically, if it's in our ICP, it's a much higher likelihood to convert. And so that's one of the first things, and a huge filter on our free trials is it within our ICP? And if it's not, that's okay. Let them go experience our free product and our paid self-serve product. But if it is, that's a really good sign that they're probably gonna need enterprise. And then looking at this is just 2 examples of some of the product signals we use. If they're looking at our docs pages, if they're clicking on secondary product lines, we use about 10 other signals as well within the product to tell us if they are a good fit. But when we implemented this, we were able to consolidate our tech stack, kind of going straight to the source. And then this is actually a recent initiative we did. So at the time, we were able to maintain our conversion rate. And now within the last month, we've actually seen it continue to increase, like literally week over week. And so we're seeing a lot of success from that and a lot of happy salespeople as well. All right, and then the last one I want to talk about is customer success. A few slides ago, I talked about the heart of the customer, how looking through the customer's lens is really important. And I think not giving your CS team access to product data is a little bit like asking a race car driver to wear a blindfold. If they don't know what their customers are doing in the product, it's kind of impossible for them to do their job. And I don't really mean just kind of like vanity metrics like have they logged in recently or how many users do they have in their tool, but really understanding like how they're actually utilizing the product. And so one really good example that we learned actually is we have this idea of you're able to execute tests. And then we have this idea of if you're actually doing it day over day and have it integrated into your pipeline. And so before, our CS team was really looking at, how many tests have you executed and using sort of that vanity metric to gauge if they were using our product. And we found that wasn't really predicting churn and wasn't really telling us if they were actually using our product. And so we worked with our data team to actually identify some different inputs to go into a customer health score that were more aligned to how often they're using us, if they're using us daily. And that was a much better sign that we were integrated into their CI/CD pipeline and that it would be much more difficult to take us out and that we're actually probably an integral part of their process. And then so what we did with that was we took that health score that was piped into Snowflake and we were able to create alerts off of that and basically proactively alerting the CS team on if a customer dipped below a certain customer health score or utilization rate. This has been really successful. I think we've done it in a few different ways where we've surfaced it in Looker reports or just a report in general. No matter how many reports I create, I think unless there's an alert and unless there's a proactive nudge, it has been really hard to get them to actually action on it. So once we actually implemented these alerts, we did see actual action. And we actually had an SLA where they have to go set up a meeting with the customer to discuss if this happens. So with that, we were able to save, and this is a pretty recent development as well, but with that, we were able to save 3 accounts from churn over this past quarter. And that's an example of one more thing related to CS. Another way we've been helping the CS team, especially as we're trying to do some more scaled CS comms, is surfacing different like upsell motions of intent within email and in-app. So an example here is we released a new product line that was an add-on feature. And so instead of instead of running LinkedIn ads and paid search ads and having people fill out a request a demo form, we've just actually started sending emails or in-app messages asking like, hey, are you interested in this new product line or this new feature? And if they are interested, then that basically triggers sort of like a warm outbound motion from the CS team and then some SDRs that support them to actually go and tell them more about it and give them more information about it. And so instead of just like proactively, I guess not proactively, but instead of just blanket sending information about every single thing that we launch, we're trying to understand, is this relevant to you? Do you like this? And give this customer success team a more precise targeting so that they know who to actually spend time on. So we talked about a few examples of how to actually use it within your go-to-market motions, but I also want to talk about how it actually can help you in your career. So when you become an expert on product data, you really become indispensable in your organization. With the fast advancements in AI, the ability to use and contextualize data is going to be very critical for ops professionals. There's a few things that I want to call out that can happen if you start to become fluent in product data. The first one is executive visibility. Translating product metrics into business outcomes really gets the attention from executives, from whether it's you're a manager, 2 managers above you, the board, whoever it is. If you're actually able to speak to how product metrics relate to revenue, you're going to get the attention. The second one is it's usually a faster path to promotion. The more you're able to have data fluency and be able to speak to smarter decisions and how you're able to actually have data-driven decisions, you're going to be seen as a strategic leader, and I can guarantee you will probably get promoted based off of that, or a larger scope. So having that faster path to promotion is a really big call out here. The last one, a seat at the table. There's lots of comics and graphics about marketing not having a seat at the table. I think if you're able to actually speak to these revenue-driving activities, you're not only going to get a seat at the table with sales and RevOps, but also with the product team, because you're actually speaking their language. So an action plan. I walked through a few examples, and I hope all of your wheels are turning. Some of these you may have implemented, some you may be thinking about. If you're already using product data in your workflows, congratulations. I know there's a lot of companies that aren't, and I think there's a lot of people here that are forward thinking, but there's still a lot out there that aren't doing a lot of this. And if you aren't, or if you aren't doing some of these and you'd like to, I've outlined a few key milestones that you can begin to build out a plan of action. The first one is that first slide where I showed that data source of truth. I think that's probably the most important thing here that will allow you to unlock everything, really, is having a single source of truth and having all of the data living in one place. So I know a lot of us are moving towards this data warehouse notion, but I can't stress enough how much it has helped us and able to really have no boundaries in terms of processing data. Identifying key go-to-market channels. So whether you might have some of these in place, maybe there's a few you're thinking about, I would identify which channels you think are gonna make the most impact. So, I think a lot of us are probably getting those customized onboarding out there, maybe some triggered product actions. If you don't already have those sales alerts, I would say that's one of the biggest ones where we've seen direct revenue from. And also really help the relationship with sales as well. So that's a big one I would definitely deploy. The third, training and enablement, maybe the most important one. I constantly get the question, how did you get sales bought in on whatever you're trying to launch? And it's always hard. But I think the more training and enablement you do and the more they feel comfortable with the product data, especially if you have a more technical tool, the better. So whether it's like walkthroughs, I was talking a little bit in a different session about, if you have your own AI tool, like just feeding it all the documentation so that they're able to ask it questions and things like that. But really making sure that they're comfortable with what the signals are. So in the past 2 months, we had 3 new AEs join, and they had absolutely no idea what they were getting when they got the sales alerts. And so I think making sure that it's a continued thing that you keep up and that you have documentation and you're able to train new people as they come on. And then the last piece is the feedback loop. Obviously, feedback loop is very important, not only for you to understand kind of like what's not working, if there's any sales alerts that aren't relevant, they're causing noise, but also to, again, get that buy-in from the sales team. If you get some success stories, someone comes to you and says, oh my gosh, I got this 100K op from the sales alert that you sent to me. If you go share that back to the sales team and say, hey, your colleagues are getting this, that creates a lot of FOMO and says, oh, maybe I should go look back in my inbox at those sales alerts. And that's a real example of something that happened. So I think definitely having that feedback loop and sharing back the success with the team is important. All right, and that's it. I hope everyone is ready to power up your go-to-market team. If you have any ideas, want to brainstorm a product-led growth, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email. Thank you.